Okay, we are live. Welcome to the Right to Exercise Personal Liberty versus the Need for Rehabilitation debate. Our speakers today are Alicia as the Habilitation Stater, myself, Alyssa, as the Habilitation Prover, Erica as the Habilitation Attacker. On the Liberties side, we have Ella as the Liberties Stater, Jordan as the Liberties Prover, and Holly as the Liberties Attacker. The format of this debate will be a formal debate. And first up, we have Alicia as our Habilitation Stater.
Hi, everyone. Habilitation is treatment or intervention which is intended to increase an individual's ability to live independently, according to Bannerman et al. In 1990. Habilitation increases ability to access preferred items, activities, and social interactions, teaches the individual how to eliminate or reduce unpleasant situations, and promotes independence. Children have the right to be taught effectively the things they need to know in order to adapt to their environments. I'm going to share a slide with you on the screen right now. So autonomy is an important predictor of positive living outcomes. You can see near the bottom in the circle, there's autonomy there, and it leads to self-determination. The ability to carry out daily living skills and thus gain autonomy is affected by the ability to understand what the person's being asked or what they need to do, the ability to do the tasks, and the motivation to do the tasks, according to Green and Carter. And all of these skills can be targeted in intervention. Early intensive behavior intervention is an important part of habilitation. Children with ASD who receive multiple early intensive interventions make more accelerated developmental gains, especially in language and communication, according to Rogers and Vismara. And children who receive early intensive behavior intervention demonstrate gains in IQ and adaptive behavior compared to those children who do not receive treatment. Carer burden is also a factor that we need to consider. Parents feel concerned for their children who have challenging behaviors or skill deficits. And better quality of life is important both for the family and the child who may be receiving services. Parents whose children have received ABA-based interventions report lower stress levels and better quality of life, and the child gains skills in communication and independence, according to McPhillamy and Dillenberger. I'm going to share another slide with you. This is some of the results of a study by Knapp, Romeo, and Beecham. Residential care facilities for individuals with a disability is much more expensive than if the individual is able to stay in a family home or live independently. And much of the cost for this type of service falls on the family of the individual with the disability. Residential facility living can negatively impact the quality of life both for the individual and their family. So anything that can be done to mitigate the need for a residential facility by habilitating the individual is important to consider. Treating behavioral concerns, teaching functional skills, and vocational skill training is vitally important to avoid long-term negative consequences. So you can see they separated out the costs for residential care, and it's quite a bit more than if an individual was able to live at home or in an assisted living situation. There's some legal issues pertaining to habilitation. We have Wyatt versus Stickney. It says that people with developmental disabilities have a right to treatment and habilitation, which gives the person a reasonable opportunity for improvement. There's free and appropriate public education, which requires that the child receive an opportunity to make meaningful progress in their education. And there's IDEA, which requires that the goals in a child's IEP be directed towards helping the child to gain benefit from their education. Some core ethical principles that we need to consider is do no harm. It might cause harm to withhold treatment or habilitation, such as in the case of self-injurious behaviors or aggressive behaviors, or even just in the case of an individual who's unaware or unable to implement safety precautions in their own home or in the community. We need to consider that it's our job as behavior analysts to benefit others. Interventions and treatments in ABA are designed to be applied and functional for the individual who's receiving the intervention. We also need to be just. Withholding interventions that can teach important daily living skills is not just. And according dignity is very important. We need to teach skills to their clients that will allow them to communicate their needs, wants, and desires so that they can advocate for themselves. And this isn't a skill that all of them will have necessarily without some habilitation. We also need to accept responsibility, which ensures that the individual gains meaningful benefit from the intervention, because the interventionist is responsible to make sure that the treatment is worth pursuing. Some compliance codes that are relevant. We have 2.03a, which says that behavior analysts arrange for appropriate consultations and referrals in the best interests of their client, and the best interest of the client might be to receive some habilitation services. You have 2.05a, that the rights of the client are paramount and that behavior analyst supports the client's legal rights, and this includes free and appropriate public education, IDEA, and the conclusions from Wyatt versus Stickney. And then clients, they have the right to receive treatment that's intended to give them the opportunity to learn skills that will benefit them. We also have 2.09a. Clients have the right to receive treatments that will benefit them and should be provided and informed of procedures that can provide long-term and short-term improvements to their quality of life, and that's something that we need to consider. 2.09b. The client deserves to have a behavior analyst who's working on their case advocate for their needs and to do what they can to ensure that the client is habilitated to meet the goals that are laid out to benefit them. And 4.05 discusses that a risk-benefit analysis should be conducted, and this ensures that the treatment plan for habilitation provides both short and long-term benefit to the client with a minimum of risk for negative effects. Next up will be Ella as our right to personal liberties stater. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alicia. So as she said, I am Ella, and I will be kind of giving an overview on the right to personal liberties. To start, I'm going to share an article with you that both sides actually use pretty often. It is Balancing the Right to Habilitation with the Right to Personal Liberties, the rights of people with developmental disabilities to eat too many donuts and take a nap. So here you can see who's written it, the first author being Bannerman, and that's how you will probably hear it referred to in our presentation as the Bannerman article, as both sides used it. So to begin, I would like to answer the question, what are personal liberties? According to the Bannerman article, the right to personal liberties is the right to choose and the right to refuse. So choice is the ability to choose between two events without any consequence other than the differences in the event themselves. So this means that people are completely free to make a choice without staff or parents or whoever showing disapproval or in any other way attempting to manipulate or punish the choices being made. And we'll hear from Jordan, who's the prover on the Liberties side, more specifically, but there are federal legislation that guarantees that individuals with disabilities be afforded the same rights as other citizens that age. So as you can see, personal liberties are a guaranteed right to all individuals and are important. So the question is, are they being limited at times during habilitation? And according to the Bannerman article, they are. First, it's been found that clients have little to no input in treatment. Second, client preference is often not considered when developing treatment goals. Third, an article by Salmento and Bambara from 2000 found that choices are often not provided by staff. In addition, when clients do communicate preference, staff members often don't take that into account. And those with the most severe disabilities are at the greatest risk of not being offered choices. Lastly, habilitation, it's imperative that it includes choice making as its own skill. Without the ability to make choices, individuals with disabilities are at a much greater risk to have their personal liberties limited. Also, there's an abundance of research that shows positive benefits to providing choice throughout habilitation. And Jordan will discuss these also in more detail, but just to overview, some of the benefits found in the research are an increase in preference for an activity, an increase in the amount of participation in a task, improved task performance, an increase in motivation, and a reduction in problem behavior. So those have all been noted in the research when choices are provided. There's also some core ethical principles that the Right to Personal Liberties side put together that we felt were relevant. And these all come from our text, as you know, Ethics for Behavior Analysts by Bailey and Birch. First, we must respect autonomy. Behavior analysts should promote independence and self-sufficiency by providing choices and teaching choice-making skills. Second, we must be just. Behavior analysts should treat others as they would want to be treated, which includes the freedom of choice that we all enjoy in our daily lives. Third, we must accord dignity. This means that as behavior analysts, we should teach our clients to communicate their own needs and wants. It also includes providing choices and honoring preference in regards to food, leisure activities, clothing, roommates, and living conditions. Lastly, as behavior analysts, we must treat others with care and compassion, which can be done as we provide choice in a caring way and exercise compassion when honoring client preferences. So now I will turn it over to Elisa, who is the prover for the right to habilitation.
Thank you, Ella. So there's a number of policies and documents that address the right to habilitation, both domestically as well as internationally. Article 23 of the Convention on the Rights of the Child calls on state parties to ensure effective access of children with disabilities to education, training, healthcare services, rehabilitation services, preparation for employment, and recreation opportunities in the manner that is conducive to the child's achieving the fullest possible social integration and individual development, including his or her cultural and spiritual development. It's imperative to teach such skills to individuals with intellectual, developmental, psychosocial, or other disabilities, as they're particularly vulnerable to human rights violations that are committed in the name of rehabilitation. The objective of habilitation and rehabilitation under the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities is to enable persons with disabilities to attain and maintain maximum independence, full physical, mental, social, and vocational ability, and full inclusion and participation in all aspects of life. Thus, habilitation and rehabilitation become crucial to ensuring that persons with disabilities are able to access all of their human rights. Some individuals with mental disabilities, especially those who have moderate to profound levels of disability, simply make bad choices. For example, I'm going to mention the Bannerman article. Bannerman discusses that stereotypy is very common among individuals diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. So if an individual who engages in stereotypy behavior does not have leisure skills in their repertoire, studies shows that they are more likely to engage in stereotypy behaviors. Other ways in which bad choices can impact a person are that making a lunch or not knowing how to make a lunch. So an individual may end up eating inappropriate foods or incomplete meals. In other instances, if an individual wants to have a snack, they might not have the cognitive capacity to know how much is too much. Such critical skills are almost imperative to have a firm knowledge of before choice making should be freely available to any person. The right to personal liberty side generally tends to overlook those who are unable to make simple choices, and they tend to focus more on higher functioning individuals. These individuals are typically completely independent in most simple life skills, including being able to make the right choice. Choice making is itself a skill that must, in many cases, be taught to individuals. Applied behavior analysis is a treatment option available that seeks to teach such skills to individuals in need. And according to the BACB Code of Ethics 2.09, the client has the right to effective treatment. We must also take into account that in childhood, many choices and personal liberties decisions are not made by the individual, but by their care system. So parents, the school, medical professionals, and so on, they may not be able to make a choice because they don't know how to do this. So when we think about habilitation, we must really consider the long-term goals. Where will a person be when they're 35 years old? So for this 35-year-old individual to have the repertoire necessary for basic self-care and well-being, they require a history of teaching. Can we truly expect caretakers, such as parents, to be able to do all of this on their own? Habilitation and training takes the burden off the caretaker in many ways. After performing a literature review, Pivens and Rabin found that most adults with ASD continue to live with their parents, and that most parents experience a very high level of caretaker burden, especially those who have children that are getting older. Literature continues to show that parents of sons and daughters with a developmental disability has an enduring impact on their lives and must balance care of their children with their own self-fulfillment. So to kind of really drive in the point of caretaker burden, I actually have a video that I would like to share that shows what it is like for a parent that has a severely, a child with profound disability. Oops, okay.
This is where he's put his head through the wall, and this is where he stood and kicked it. Ow, 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 He's 6'2" and he weighs 252 pounds. He can go through this house and just wipe everything out probably in 10 minutes. You know, I've had him turn furniture over. Well, you see all the windows and stuff. You know, the air conditioner back in the bedroom, he'll sit and punch that till it's in pieces. You know, in other words, if it breaks anymore, it's kind of like it's material. It can be replaced. I don't even let it bother me. But the destruction is just unbelievable. What are you so mad about?
Okay, so I will end the video there, and with that concludes my section. So next up is Jordan for the Rights to Personal Liberties Kruger section.
Hi, I'm Jordan, and I'm speaking on the Liberties side. I am the prover. As Alice stated, we will be discussing the Bannerman article in detail. The Bannerman article says that personal liberties include freedom of religion, speech, and other rights guaranteed in the U.S. Constitution. Personal liberties also include choice. People strive for freedom in addition to those with developmental disabilities. Those with developmental disabilities want to be able to make decisions from their life. And Bannerman defines choice as uncoerced selection. There are many examples when personal liberties are compromised for habilitation. Guest Benson, C. and Siegel-Cossey said that clients frequently have little to no input in their treatment goals. Families typically make all of these decisions. Teachers may also teach with no regard to the child's preference, as stated by Bannerman. Making choices are often not taught in habilitation programming. Teachers and therapists do not encourage clients to make decisions on the order and timing of the school day or sessions. The Declaration of Rights of the Mentally Retarded Persons of 1972 and the Developmental Disabilities Assistance and Bill of Rights Act of 1979 guarantee the same basic rights to those with developmental disabilities as any citizen in the U.S. And this is also found in the Bannerman article. The Standards for Payment of Skilled Nursing and Immediate Care Facility Services of 1988 asserts that clients have the right to make choices, and staff must provide the opportunities for them to make these choices, as stated by Behrman. Giving clients the right to choose mimics that and prepares the client for independence that will be experienced in the community. Choice is required to be a functioning citizen. Allowing choice-making opportunities promotes self-determination, which increases positive adult outcomes and increases the perceived quality of life for those with disabilities, as stated by Sjogren et al., 2004. As Alice stated, individuals prefer situations that allow choice, and choice is beneficial for individuals, as stated by Behrman. The Behrman article breaks down how choice can affect positively interventions. The effects of choice on preference are found by Brigham and Stosinger, who said that children that choose tasks in which they had choice of their reinforcers, and compared to those that did not have choice of their reinforcers, were more likely to be chosen. Beyer, Berkson, Wingera, and Morton also stated that adolescents that choose which chair to sit in engage in less stereotypy. There are also benefits for the choice on task performance. Those that chose the given treatment for recalling words performed better than those that did not choose their treatment. Dickerson and Creedon found that student-selected performance consequences showed a greater number of correct responses than those which teacher had selected the consequences. I'm going to bring up an article right now. This graphic shows from the Cole and Levinson article of 2002 that the number of steps of a task analysis of hand washing increased before the presence of problem behaviors in the choice condition. So as you can see, those that had choice on how to break down the task analysis for hand washing demonstrated less problem behaviors. Sjogren also found that enhanced opportunities for choice making are associated with positive outcomes in a variety of settings. And choice making can increase adaptive behavior, work performance, task engagement, social behavior, and eye contact for people with developmental disabilities. There are also benefits for choice on participation in activities. Individuals are more likely to participate in activities when choice is available. Bannerman found that adolescents participating in group decision-making that identified consequences were more likely to participate. There are also effects of choice on problem behavior. Sjogren did a meta-analysis of 13 studies and found that providing opportunities to make choices can serve as an intervention for decreasing problem behavior. Children with autism exhibited fewer problem behaviors, including decreases in aggression and self-injury, when they had choices of tasks, materials, and reinforcers, as stated by Bannerman et al. Children with autism demonstrate less avoidant behaviors when they engage in activities of their choice. Students with disabilities are also found to be more compliant when they can control the pace of instruction during vocational tasks, as stated by Bannerman. We're going to go to another visual, last one. Dyer, Dunlap, and Winterling used a reversal design to find that choice conditions resulted in significantly lower levels of problem behavior for 3 participants, including reduces in aggressive behaviors with 3 different students. So here is the first graph, and as you can see, the choice condition showed much fewer problem behaviors. This is for the first participant. The second participant is less pronounced, but as you can see, there are less problem behaviors occurring. And the third participant, there are also fewer problem behaviors in the choice condition. There are also effects of choice on aversive stimulation. Those that were able to control an aspect of the aversive stimulation reported less discomfort than those that were not able to choose the form of aversive stimulation, ranging from shocks, loud noises, or written tasks. And this was found by Cora and Boffa from 1970. Salamento and Barbera evaluated staff training packages to present choice-making opportunities in the daily routines of 4 adults. This study indicated that choice-making opportunities are available and can be used by staff, and should be. Providing choice-making opportunities has many advantages. They are reported as increasing quality of life, decreasing problem behaviors, increasing task engagement, and increasing motivation. I am now going to turn it over to Erica with the habilitation attacker side.
Hello everyone, I am Erica. My role in this debate is the habilitation attacker. The right to personal liberties does not outweigh the crucial need for effective, accessible habilitation for individuals with disabilities. As defined in the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, habilitation means to make capable, as for functioning in society. All members of society have a responsibility to contribute to society if they are able and if the means are made available to them to learn how to contribute to society. The ultimate goal of habilitation services is to increase the ability to function effectively in society, as stated in an article by Van Houten et al. 1988. Just as neurotypicals are expected to receive education, individuals with disabilities should receive habilitation as a long-term benefit to both the individual and our society as a whole. Societies enable their members to lead productive lives by effectively educating their members, per Barrett article 1991. Habilitation has been proven effective in educational settings, and after early intervention, approximately 95% of children will move on to lesser restrictive programs, and some children will even move on to general education settings, as stated by the article Greenberg and Martinez, 2008. It is the law to provide habilitation. According to multiple lawsuits, government acts, and the VACB Ethical Compliance Code 2.09, individuals have a right to effective treatment, and it is mandated. Habilitation actually increases independence for individuals. The impact of habilitation on children is improved communication, better behavior, more independence, as stated in an article by McPhilmy and Dillenberger, 2013. Clients are actually able to enjoy more reinforcers and have more freedom with habilitation. They have the chance to have contact with more different reinforcers, a wider range, and these people actually have more freedom than those who are denied habilitation and are not in a position to make these choices, to have these choices, or to experience these reinforcers, according to Bailey and Birch, 2006. Well-being is improved with habilitation. Habilitation can improve happiness, increase joy, and overall quality of life for individuals with disabilities. It improves one's behavior, helps people have a higher quality of life with less pain, less frustration, and more enjoyment. Habilitation such as ABA supports and promotes assertiveness training. It helps free a person of abuse and exploitation. It takes away barriers to joy and happiness, according to Bailey and Birch, 2006. Functional skills are improved with habilitation. Significant empirical evidence exists that early and intensive behavior interventions based on ABA result in noticeable and lasting functional improvements for children with autism spectrum disorder. This was from an article, Baer, Wolf, and Risley, 1968. Independent living skills and functional behaviors should be taught by service providers, per Bannerman et al., 1990. It is important to look at the trade-off for habilitation. A small portion of life in habilitation or intensive intervention can actually lead to a much longer and fuller period of freedom for the majority of one's life. Habilitation gives individuals the freedom to make choices, possibly to someday live and work independently, possibly get married and have children, with less chance of abuse and exploitation and less chance of future guardianships. According to Bannerman et al., 1990, abridging personal liberties in order to teach independent living skills is an appropriate trade-off. Parents and caregivers can actually make decisions now for these individuals without the client's full consent to participate in habilitation so that the client has a greater chance of making their own choices in the future. Also, these guardians are legally entitled to make the best decisions for the individuals if habilitation is the best choice. Without habilitation, compulsive behaviors such as repetition and self-injury can actually take away freedom from individuals. From Bailey and Birch, 2006. What if individuals with developmental disabilities do not have the skills necessary to make choices? Many individuals don't know how to choose. This skill needs to be included in therapy techniques. Choice making should actually be integrated in habilitation process. Many people require teaching to assist them in finding their own preferences and how to make wise choices. People should be taught how to make choices and use their freedoms responsibly. Many people with developmental disabilities make bad choices. They may attempt a skill that they have not mastered yet, such as trying to take a bus without knowing how, and this is simply not safe. Individuals must understand the consequences of their choices and of their actions, per Bannerman article, 1990. There are potential risks associated with choosing liberty over habilitation. Allowing clients the right to choose all things may actually impede their learning of necessary independent living skills. Again, from the Bannerman article, 1990. Without habilitation, some individuals are a possible danger to themselves and others. Self-injury is a major clinical problem, and it can result in significant injury and even death. It has been associated with negative outcomes for caregivers, such as caregiver stress. Epidemiological surveys suggest that up to 20% of adults with intellectual disability engage in some form of self-injurious behavior, as stated in Hastings and Nguyen, 2005. The cost of lifelong institutionalization and extended school supports is very high if a person is not habilitated through early intervention. This increases the expense for parents, caregivers, schools, governments, hospitals, insurance companies, and our society as a whole. Habilitation may also improve guardian and family quality of life by reducing emotional, financial, and physical burden on caregivers, per Hastings and Nguyen, 2005. Ethical and effective habilitation is not exclusive of personal liberties. The BACB Professional and Ethical Compliance Code for Behavior Analysts actually emphasizes and requires protection of personal liberties, such as promoting dignity, being just, respecting autonomy of clients, requiring client involvement in planning, respecting client confidentiality and protecting that, according a least restrictive environment, and gaining consent for all treatment. Next, Holly will be speaking as attacker for personal liberties.
Thank you, Erica. I am Holly, and I am, in fact, covering on the attacker side of the personal liberties. In a legal context, personal liberties includes freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and other rights that are guaranteed by the Constitution. This is per the Bannerman article. Free choice is protected and also encouraged in the United States. It's a cherished aspect of American life. Those with disabilities are just like those who don't have disabilities. Non-disabled people are as likely to engage in undesirable forms of behavior or potentially dangerous forms of behavior. It is important, however, that those with disabilities also understand that their actions have consequences. A quote from the Bannerman article by Supreme Court Justice William O. Douglas: "Personal liberties are, quote, the right to be let alone," end quote. This includes, quote, "the privilege of an individual to plan his own affairs, to shape his life as he thinks best, to do what he pleases, go where he pleases, freedom from bodily restraint or compulsion, freedom to walk, stroll, or loaf," end quote. People have the right to multiple options. They have the right to choice. Personal liberties is all about choice. With the developmental disabilities, these people also have autonomy, as was covered by Ella, I believe, earlier. Personal liberties can be impacted by habilitation standards, including remaining cost-effective and satisfying consumers, such as family members or investors' needs. Kitchen staff may not take into account an individual with disabilities' choices so that they can remain cost-effective. Another thing to consider is that when families are present for family days, an individual who is in a assisted living place may not have a choice in what they eat while their families are there or the clothing that they wear. We have to make sure that choice is included in what these people are allowed to do. If they have a choice between learning to play basketball or doing watercoloring, it should be the choice of the client, not the choice of the caretakers. When choices are offered, the people are more likely to participate. There are some stereotypic behaviors that don't harm the client. In fact, asking for freedom believe that many forms of therapy are unethical, such as those that focus on harmless stereotypic behavior, the keyword being harmless, forcing individuals to make eye contact, and disrupting the routines of individuals with ASD. And this comes from Autism Rights Movement 2016. We all make choices that are not in our long-term best interest. For example, we often choose to eat things that are bad for us, like donuts or chips, instead of things that we know are good for us, vegetables. We occasionally choose to stay up late and pay the price later, but we still make that choice. We need to allow clients the opportunity to occasionally make choices that are simply for their enjoyment. And as long as they're offered healthier choices more often than they're picking them, then we don't have a problem. If the skill of choice making is made a priority during habilitation, so it can be included in habilitation, then the argument that individuals with intellectual disabilities cannot make choices would no longer be relevant. They should be taught how to make healthy choices most often, which would lead to more independence later. Parents and guardians and others with influence over a disabled person's care are not always the best judgment of what they want and how they should be able to give consent. Ethical review boards and committees, which include members with disabilities, can help make these decisions for those who are unable to give consent, but are still flawed, because the perspective and opinion of the member with disabilities may not reflect the desires of the individual. When an individual is unable to give consent to a procedure, it needs to be determined and decided by the courts through due process. The Americans with Disabilities Act states that any person with a disability has the same rights as a person without a disability. That is critical. And the severity of a person's disability has no bearing on their rights. Habilitation should include a rights to personal liberties. So we can stick them together, but it too often is overlooked. In an interview by Nonmaker and Bombera, adults with intellectual disabilities were interviewed, and it found that these adults had examples that illustrated times that their self-determination was not honored by staff. The examples most often included staff making decisions for them, staff controlling the spending of their money, staff not providing opportunities for them to voice their opinions or making them feel uncomfortable in doing so, staff not following through with changes once preferences had been stated, and staff using coercive or manipulative methods to influence their choices of what they indicated to be desired. It is simple, folks. All people, regardless of ability, have the right to make choices for themselves. It can be included in habilitation. They don't have to be separated. Next, Alicia will discuss the habilitation conclusions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Holly. To conclude, habilitation remains a right of the people with disabilities. This is treatment or intervention that allows them to live more independent lives. Compliance Code 4.05 states that a risk-benefit analysis needs to be conducted, and 2.09a states that treatment needs to provide both short and long-term benefit to the individual receiving the treatment. By focusing on the skills required for independence and functionality, irrelevant behaviors which are not determined to adversely affect the individual's ability to learn functional skills and lead an independent life should not be targeted in ethical habilitation. Habilitating clients helps them to learn the skills to live independently, which can allow them to avoid more restrictive choices are more restricted due to cost and efficiency constraints, as discussed in the Bannerman et al. And the Nonmacher and Bombara articles. Habilitation is proven to lead to more skills and less restrictive outcomes for individuals who are developmentally disabled. It improves the quality of life both for the individual and the family in many areas, including stress levels, independence, and financial burden. The law mandates habilitation in clinics, residential facilities, and schools. Ethical habilitation already incorporates personal liberties. Compliance Codes 2.09c and 4.02 address this directly. Client preference is one of the considerations alongside effectiveness when choosing an intervention for habilitation, and client's consent and participation in planning is mandated. Arguments that habilitation is mutually exclusive to personal liberties when habilitation is carried out ethically is just not true. Without consent and input from the client, ethical habilitation doesn't happen. Thank you guys very much. Up next will be Ella, who's going to be the arguments for the right to personal liberties side.
Thank you, Alicia. So as Alicia stated, my side also concluded that habilitation and the right to personal liberties should be brought together. Unfortunately, we've also heard in this debate how these personal liberties are being limited during the application of some habilitation treatments or in some habilitation settings. As stated in the Bannerman article, behavior analysts should work to teach and provide choice within the context of habilitation. Even simple choices can increase the quality of life for an individual with disabilities. So yes, habilitation and liberties can go together, but as stated by Holly, we can do much, much better at providing and protecting choice for individuals with disabilities in our country. I know that personally, through my work for this debate, I have an increased motivation to provide choices for the clients that I work with. I just wanted to share one article by James Ellis. Give me 1 second. There we go. In this article, he also concludes, quote, "As we seek to sharpen the law's focus on the needs of individuals with mental disabilities, a careful and sometimes delicate balance must be struck between protecting those individuals from harm and enhancing their autonomy and living their own lives." So thank you so much for listening to our debate, and now I will turn it over to Dr. Bassett for questions.
Okay, well, thank you. I think your group did a really nice job presenting some of the different sides of the arguments in regards to personal liberties and habilitation. And so your group kind of touched on this a little bit, but I was wondering if someone could elaborate a bit more on the types of differences that there might be when thinking about this topic in terms of if you're working with adults versus when working with children.
Hello. One area that I would address in that is, of course, liberties with people under the age of 18 or someone that has not reached full maturity. You would probably be making more of the choices for them, and they would be having less liberties versus someone that might have a mild intellectual disability and possibly is over the age of 18. They may make the choice to have a boyfriend or a girlfriend. They may make the choice, if they were an older adult, to possibly have a beer. I mean, there's things like that that we have to consider when people reach an age where they would have more rights and less restriction by their parents.
Okay, yeah, very good. So the next question I had was, so I worked previously with clients who were funded through Medicaid, and so a lot of the clients that I worked with had very limited resources. They may not necessarily have a lot of family support, and so this is what kind of spurred me to think of this question. And so I was just curious if any of the research that you found, or just based on your own interpretations or maybe your own experiences, how might you address choice making for individuals when they have limited choices really available, or the choices that they want to make are really outside of their financial means, or the things that they want to be able to do are just not available because of limited finances? I don't if anybody has any type of experience with that, or anything that you saw in the research that maybe address that to some extent. I've worked with the post-secondary population in a public school district, so that's ages 18 through 22. And we do run into that because a lot of our families in our district are low income. And what we've done is, when we have a student who wants things that aren't available currently because of financial options, we'll do one of two things. We'll either offer the options that are available, and usually there is something that they can choose from. And the other thing that we do is that we provide them vocational training, and then they have their own income that they can put towards things that they want. Okay, that's excellent. Yeah, and I think, teaching them, again, the consequences of their actions, and that if they can work and earn their own income, then they're more likely to be able to get the things that they want. Okay, so, and your group also touched on this a bit, but I was just wondering if you could elaborate maybe a little bit more, because one of the things that I would hear a lot when I worked, especially with adult services, was that we can't, let people do too much because of, concerns about them getting injured or liability. And so, is there do you have any personal experiences, or did you find in the research anything that talked about providing autonomy and opportunities for self-determination while balancing safety and concerns about liability?
No, I didn't personally find anything in my research about that. However, I would think a lot of it would go to just deferring back to the parents or the caregivers and guardians, and just being really sure that we receive consent before we begin any kind of a behavior plan or do any kind of an activity, and that in some way would ensure liability on our behalf.
Yeah, so one of the things go ahead. Oh, sorry. I was going to say the other thing is, as I said, I've worked with young adult populations, and some of them are more severely disabled than others. Some of them have been conserved and others have not. We actually had a situation a while back where one of our conserved students wanted to take the bus home by himself. He didn't want people going with him. And so we worked with his guardian to get permission first, and she did have to sign some forms saying that it was going to be okay. And then we taught him all the steps to do it. He was shadowed, like he would sit on one side of the bus and say maybe the front, and then a staff member would sit near the back, so it wasn't right on top of him at first. And when he was able to do it independently, they would shadow in the car to make sure he didn't get off at the wrong stop. And now he's taking the bus completely independently. And so I think that there are ways that we can help teach them to do the things that they want to do if we're concerned about safety.
Okay, excellent. That's a really very good example of what I was thinking, and yeah, kind of thinking about how you can set up safe situations to help teach them those skills. And so that's a perfect example of how to do that. So thank you for sharing that. And so the last question I have is, does anybody else have any other personal experiences that are relevant to this topic that might be of interest that you would like to share in regards to this whole idea of balancing, or kind of how can you successfully integrate the need for personal liberties while providing habilitation?
I actually have a comment. I taught middle schoolers for 10 years and had co-teaching classes where I taught half children that were serviced by IEPs and half regular ed children. I found over and over and over again that providing them with the ability to make simple choices, even though I had a class full of 30 kids and a special ed co-teacher in the room, still providing them with the ability to make, we set up centers, my co-teacher and I. So during the course of the day or during the course of the class period, the child would rotate through 4 centers. Simply providing them a choice of which one they started with often got them working harder. Even ESL students in the room at the same time were able to make choices, and they were willing to participate with native English speakers, which helped their ability to speak English. So servicing all types of children can be done in any type of classroom. So just a thought.
No, that's terrific. And I think, just trying to think of, okay, what is really that important, and how can I offer this as a choice to my client, when I'm working, however, in whatever setting you're working with them, what is available to them, and how can I make this a choice that can give them some autonomy and learn to make decisions for themselves? Because I know some of the adults that I worked with, by the time they were older, they were so used to relying on other people to tell them what to do. It was hard for them to make a choice. They didn't have that skill. So I think that's an important skill to work with, just like Holly mentioned, with kids when they're younger as well. So does anybody else have any other personal experiences that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I have a quick comment that I can make. I work at an ABA center, so habilitation and personal liberties, obviously, they kind of go hand in hand when I'm on the floor with the kids. And that Bannerman article is funny because I experience that at work every single day. We have a lot of kids who, they like their snacks, and if they request a snack, we ethically cannot deny them a snack. But some of the skills that we actually work on with our kids are like tolerating denied access or waiting for preferred items, because while they're with us in our in our ABA centers or clinics or whatever, we know how to interact with these kids. But a lot of the students on my team in particular, we have to think about how they're going to interact in the community and with strangers who don't know anything about them. So we try to teach them skills that will help them integrate in the community. So if a stranger doesn't know that this person can't handle being denied access to something, then it's that much more important to teach that student to be able to tolerate being told no. Because we might know how to handle that behavior, but strangers might not. So so we have to teach them some of those skills where, you can't have this, or you have to wait to have it. So yeah, that's just my comment.
Yeah, and I think that's a terrific point too, in thinking about, the fact that the least restrictive environment, once they enter into adulthood, it is going to be the community. And so what are the types of skills that they're going to need to be successful in those community settings? And, some of the adults that I worked with, as soon as something happened out in the community, there was concerns about other people's, liability and safety. And so then people were quick to jump to maybe try to place them in a more restrictive setting. And so, teaching them those skills early on so that they can be able to utilize those, throughout their adolescence and into adulthood is really critical. So does anybody else have anything else that you'd like to add at this point? Okay, well, great job. So we could go ahead and end the recording there. So again, I think your group did a really nice job.